Hey everybody, what's going on? Man Cave here. This one is actually going to be a special video. This video here is filmed solely for Pudge A69. He not going to go into major details, but he wanted to know basically what my opinion of what the strongest axle was. So I'm going to go in depth, which most of you guys already know what I'm running. And I actually have to, I owe him one on this one because I just noticed there's a little bit of water here in the back ring gear, which is not a big deal. Grease will take care of that. But here I'm going to go into extreme detail on what I think is the toughest axle so far that I've ever built. And it's based off of the AR60s. They are the Vanquish housings for the AR60. The Vanquish trusses up here. On this I'm using the dog bones in the rear because it's really, since there's no turning, it's not really that bad on snapping. For gearing, I'm using the Axial Overdrive 46 or 4316 gearing, front and rear. Coupled to that is a Hot Racing SHD locker, which fits the AX10 axle and the Wraith and Ridgecrest. I'm using full ceramic bearings, which I just did that to figure to cut down on friction. I'm using Vanquish's bearing caps, which you don't have to use those, and mine didn't have to be red, but it matched the theme, so that's what I did. My bearings I got from Fast Eddie's, so I made sure that I got some good bearings. For the rear, I just used the simple lockouts, and they're coupled to the OMF 2.2s. It's a very, very strong. The reason why I went with the overdrive gears is the stock gears. It's kind of like when you change out the gear ratio on a car. If you're driving on the highway every day, you want a good low gear ratio that it gets up to speed quick and stays there. Well, that wouldn't be every day. That'd be more of like a drag racing type deal. The stock gearing, you get up to speed pretty quick and you stay there. The overdrive gears actually give you more room to flex inside of there, so you've got more time in between where you start your spinning and when you reach max RPM with it. Now that's a look at the rear axle. Of course, I had to use Showtime to do this just because it's got the bulletproof axles on it. Front is the same setup. The only difference is up front I'm running VVDs, because the very first run I had Pork Chop on, which used these same exact axles. The very first run, not only did I snap, but I ripped the ear off of the dog bone and bent the shaft completely, and then proceeded to drive it still and snap the other end off completely too. So that's definitely, you'd want either the RC 4-wheel drive XVD or the equivalent of the Axial ones, since they are a U-joint style. Well, I can actually better even show you an example for that. The Axial XVDs, we all know, have the pivoting yoke on it, which that tends to, when your steering is out pretty far, it tends to put this in a bind and cause your wheel to want to stutter and try to lock up on you. And I've actually had a few sets of these snap. So the difference between the VVDs that I have and the VVDs I had from Vanquish, those were very expensive. Those got sold. Those are Top Cad VVDs. They're pretty much the same style. As you can see, those have a closed rather than open style to it, so that really does away with all that. But these are very strong. The stock Axial ones are pretty strong. They're just not as strong as the closed XVDs would be. The bearings, obviously you want really good bearings in it. That way you're not going to have to change them out every 5 or 6 runs. This all can be done also on the stock AR60 axles that come off of a ready to run or a kit version Wraith. It's actually cheaper to do it that way. I opted to go full metal with it since I had a full metal chassis, so it kind of fit the build. The only thing that I do have to note with the VP axles is if you tighten the screws too tight, they're very, very, very easy to strip out. Which, I mean, you can do that with the axial ones too, but with plastic you just can put a bigger screw in it and be done with it. With the metal ones, you've got to be very careful with your torque on the screws, and I highly suggest using Loctite on them. That way they don't back off, especially on the front, because these will have a tendency to get loose. I've not really had any issues with the knuckles coming loose from the chubs, but I do have the chubs getting loose on the axles issue because they've gotten torqued a couple times, not by me. I let one of my friends help assemble it, and he kind of over tightened the screws on the front, and it didn't really want to say anything or call him out on it, but he kind of messed it up. But the bearing caps, those are pretty straightforward as I check the tension on them. I've noticed that I've had to do a lot of run for about 5 minutes, pull everything apart, check it, make sure it was all good. And I think after about 2 or 3 weeks of doing this repeatedly, I finally got it to where it was decent. And as far as the beefiest motor setup that I've thrown into these axles particularly is sitting right back here, a Traxxas VXL3S with a 3550 motor, and that is actually the bomb-proof transmission that I had originally in it, which the only thing stock on that is the Wraith housing. Everything internally is Robinson Racing, including the Super Shafty top shaft mod with a Robinson Racing 32 pitch slash slipper unit. That thing was crazy fast. The only issue I had with it was cogging because it is sensorless. And I mean, we're all going to have cogging issues. Even with censored, it's still going to cog some. But by far, I mean, the T-Rex axles, if you get the aluminum ones, they're good. The plastic ones, I've actually gotten the bearings so hot that I've started to melt the axle housings. Never had that problem with a stock axial axle, of course. I never tried putting a ridiculously fast motor. The other combination that I had running to it would be a Castle Sidewinder SCT with a 3800. Yeah, 3800 4-pole motor. This thing was ridiculous, and I ran it on a Gens Ace 40C 3-cell LiPo. The main battery that it was originally run on was actually a 5600 60C, which is in my son's Slash. This is the one I use majorly, the 50C 5000. But what's running in Showtime right now is actually a 20C 5000, and it's plenty of power with the AX2 transmission from RC 4-wheel drive, but that's getting away from the axle here. The drive shafts, Punisher shafts are no doubt the hardest drive shafts I've ever owned. I've yet to ever break a metal Punisher. I've broken plastic ones, but then again, who hasn't? I mean, they're extremely, they took pretty much the same design as a MIP, but they're just a little bit better. They don't really rust either, because I've got a set of MIPs right here that I was going to use originally, and as you can see, they rust pretty quick. But the main draw of the Punisher is instead of having this round bell on it, you've got the actual heavy-duty U-joint down there. which hasn't caused a bind issue yet. It's mainly just because the pinion angle is pretty legit on it. It's not that far off from... it's not nowhere near as bad as the Jeep is. The Jeep's got a ridiculous pinion angle on it. But I hope that helps a little bit there on tough axles. Now that I pulled the diff covers off, I do realize I need to do some greasing, so there you go, man. Hope that helps a little bit. There's a million different ways to build an axle and make them strong. I'm sure other people are going to leave some comments on how they've built some tough axles and their recommendations, but this is the setup that I've run on mine, and so far it's been pretty damn bulletproof. I haven't had a single issue at all with it. So I hope that helps you out a little bit, and can't wait to get this thing back out on the trails after I re-grease it. So there you go.